Casey Gray here from The Conscious Builder. And on today's episode, we have a good friend of mine, Stephen Magneron from Homesol Building Solutions. We have had Stephen on the show before, and it's always a great conversation, especially now because there is a lot of exciting things coming down the pipeline when it comes to improving the performance of your home. Grants, loans, and really understanding energy audits is what we get into. Is what exactly is an energy audit? That is what we're going to get into. I won't hold you up any longer. Here is Stephen Magneron. Stephen, welcome back to the show. Good to virtually see you. Anyways, we used to see each other a lot more, but world has changed.
It has. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, I'm excited. There's obviously lots going on in the construction world, and there seems to be some exciting news coming down in your world too. We need a lot of unknowns like we were discussing earlier, but I think it's still important to start talking about this stuff now, and also give a little bit of a teaser for what you're going to be talking about in a couple of weeks from now at the SmartNet Alliance event, where you're going to be going more in depth about what we'll get into here around the energy consulting and advising. So we'll get into all that. But let's start for the people who don't know who you are, maybe didn't hear the previous episode. I think it's been almost 2 years now, I guess, last time you were on. Who are you? Who are you with? And how did you get into this industry?
So my name is Stephen Magneron. I'm with Homesol Building Solutions. I've been an energy advisor for about 10 or 11 years with them. Before I started up with Homesol, I was a carpenter. I went through Algonquin College and did the advanced housing construction carpentry course there, which was 50% building science and 50% actual carpentry, practicals and theoretics. And then I worked for a company for a couple of years after that, and then found my way to Homesol. So now I was able to use some of my carpentry skills and then apply it to what I'm doing now. So it's worked out nicely, I think. And what does Homesol do? We are energy conservation consultants. We work with homeowners, builders, architects, everyone to try and reduce the energy consumption of their homes and buildings through energy modeling and air tightness testing and building science consulting. So we do everything from code minimums to Energy Star, R2000, Passive House, Net Zero, and LEED.
Yeah, and we've been working with Homesol for 7-8 years now, I guess, since we built our first passive house. And Stephen pretty well comes into all of our projects to do floor door testing and work with us on whatever it is the target that we're hitting, whether it's passive house or Net Zero or R2000. I think we've worked on all of those houses together. So Steph and I obviously know each other quite well on that front. So that's why we have Stephen here, because Stephen can speak a lot about the energy side. But what I like, Stephen, too, is that you have the carpentry side too. So there's nothing worse, like you're not a home inspector, but there's nothing worse than like a home inspector who has never actually worked on homes. And they're just telling you things that like needs to be repaired or things that need to be repaired. I've seen some really bad home inspector reports, right? You can actually you understand how things go together, right? And that, I think that's where I want to start actually is the energy audit. Let's maybe do a little bit of a breakdown of what exactly an energy audit is. And then I have some questions about what should come first, because there's a lot of things that we can do in houses, and we'll get into those details and what people how people can maybe plan better for that. So what exactly is a home energy audit?
Yeah, so an energy audit for an existing house, let's I'm guessing we'll be focusing more on existing housing. So if we would come into a house and collect a lot of data. So first we would ask the homeowner what their intentions are, if they have any issues with the house, mainly from a comfort perspective, but also if they have higher than expected energy bills. So we collect all that kind of data. Then we go around measuring the house. We need to measure the house for the energy model. We need the geometry of the house, all the dimensions of the windows, the volume of the house for the air tightness test. We go around and get as much information as possible from the house, inside and outside, including the mechanicals. And all that ends up going into the energy model. We use HOT 2000 for that. And then once we've collected all that data, we even poke our heads up into the attic just to see what kind of insulation there is. Once we've collected all that data, we do an air tightness test. The air tightness test depressurizes the house, and the result gives us an ACH value, which we end up putting into the energy model. The ACH gives us an idea of how leaky the house is, and which is a bit of an eye opener sometimes. And then once we have that information, we run the fan and then we go around looking for any significant air leaks. And we always encourage homeowners to come around with us at that point, because it's great to actually see where the air leak is coming from as much as possible. Obviously, the house is in a finished state, so it's very difficult to look behind the walls, but we do our best. And there are a lot of assumptions and a lot of known areas for air leakage as far as that goes. And if the temperature difference between inside and outside is sufficient, is great enough, then sometimes we can have infrared cameras, which will help us identify air leaks. But obviously that's not something that we can use all year round. But that's it in a nutshell as far as the evaluation side goes. Then once we have an energy model, we are able to make upgrades to the house. So we have our base case, and then we say, okay, well, what happens if we do all these upgrades to the house? Where does it end up? Typically, it ends up at net zero ready, and then all you have to do is put PV panels on the roof. But we take the house as a system approach, meaning that no one single upgrade will get you there. It would be great, but there's a lot that is involved, a lot of components, and they all work together to get to the end goal. So we typically start with the thermal enclosure first, so reducing the consumption of the house and the need for additional energy to keep the house comfortable. And that includes all the insulation, the windows, the air tightness. And then we start looking at the mechanicals. Well, actually, I'll take a step back and say, when we look at the air tightness, we always aim for a super tight house. So 0 ACH is our goal. And if we get to that level, or even close to that level, we always recommend mechanical ventilation. It goes hand in hand. So build it tight, ventilate it right. So that's always
that's a good saying.
Sort of, yeah. It's I didn't coin it. I think Joe Schubrick or other great fellows in the building science industry coined that one, but it's a good one. And then once we've reduced those loads, then we look at the heating and cooling system and the hot water. So that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that was a great summary. So there's some questions that are probably coming up for some people. The first one, actually, I'm just wondering, is there any surprises when it comes to air leakage areas? Like when you go around with homeowners and you're like, look, here's where the air leakages are they surprised by them? Are you surprised by them? Or are they always the same for the most part?
They're typically the same, depending on the age of the house. I mean, if one was living in an old century home and it hasn't been updated at all, and there's probably no insulation, the homeowners know that it's pretty drafty and very uncomfortable. So that's no big surprise there. The actual number might be a bit of a surprise, but the actual locations of everything is typically not. That's another reason why I asked for the comfort issues, because if there is a certain room that is maybe cooler in the wintertime, then I would focus a lot of my attention there and see if I can find an air leak that is helping cause that issue. But otherwise, it's, there's a list of areas that we typically look at, and those are the areas that we usually find leaks.
What
pretty much
areas?
anything. Oh yeah, so attic hatch, if it doesn't have a good gasket on it, then that's one area. Outlets on exterior walls, depending on the age of the house, there probably wasn't any air tightness strategy that was used to air seal that area. So we look for air leaks there. In the basement is a good place to go because there are many things that go out through the basement walls or through the header cavities, like the ventilation system, if there is one, or the exhaust for the heating and cooling system and domestic hot water. And also windows. Sometimes we look at windows, and if they're sliders, they typically leak. Like patio doors, the top and bottom of patio doors usually have a lot of air leakage. If there's a room above the garage, we'll usually go into that room and feel around the register to see if there's air leaking through there. Now, we can't pinpoint the exact area, but garage drops, as we typically refer to them as, are known to be a problem area from an air tightness point of view. So those are the high level ones.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing, is that you're saying that the air leakage, although it's coming in one area, might not necessarily be the source. It's just how it's getting into the actual home at that point, but it might have got into the assembly before that.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we can only do as much as we can in the finished state, but it depends on what the air barrier is. But yeah, air is like water. Water could be leaking into a house at one corner of the house, but you'll only see it pop up inside the house at another location because it travels down through the path of least resistance and then shows itself somewhere random. Same thing with air leaks. Depending on what your air barrier strategy is, you could the air leak could be in one part of the house, but you don't have access to that area until you get to another part of the house, and then you feel an air leak there. And then, based on our experience, we can provide an educated guess as to what's happening in that location. But ultimately, to really address it, you would have to get a bit more intrusive, and that's not part of our general scope of work as far as the typical evaluation.
I like that you said air barrier strategy. So anybody who's building or renovating a house, if your contractor doesn't have an air barrier strategy, he's probably not thinking about how to make your home as comfortable as possible. Because air tightness is, and Stephen, correct me if you think otherwise, but in my opinion, air barrier is the most important thing to make sure that your home is comfortable.
It's I would almost say yes. From a comfort perspective, the air barrier strategy is the most important. From a general house and building durability point of view, water is the most important, I would say. So taking care of bulk moisture on the outside, and by bulk moisture I mean rain, essentially, and making sure you've got downspouts that shed that water away from the house, and the grading is good on the outside. That's your first line of defense, and that's the first thing that every house and homeowner should be taking care of. But yes, from a comfort perspective and from a building durability perspective, air tightness is pretty key. And the side effect of that is that that you have less energy waste because you're keeping it in. So yeah, it's pretty important.
Begin with. But yeah, that's a good point on the structural side of things. But once again, if you're not controlling the air barrier, then you could have moisture coming in through those leaky parts or leaving through that house and causing issues in your walls. So anybody, like, this is an easy test. Like, it's warmer now, but if somebody was in their house in the winter, they could probably go down to their basement, put their hand by any of the plugs in the basement and just feel the air coming in, because of just the stack effect, right? The cold air from outside coming in through their house and going out through the top floor. It's pretty simple test, but that's why we put so much attention into where the air barrier is and making sure that we don't penetrate it with plugs or switches or light octagon boxes, pot lights, all these things. If the air barrier is on the inside, directly below, behind the drywall, this is going to be an issue for air tightness in a home. So these are things that you should be, if you have the ability to, avoid doing, right? And working with a contractor, an energy advisor, and an architect who can ultimately work through these details with you. And if done properly, they don't have to cost an arm and a leg. Sure, there is some extra work. Like anything better, it's going to take a little bit more time and cost a little bit extra, but it's definitely worth it in the end, 100%. The
Agreed.
All right. Now, when you come in and you do that energy audit and you give this to the homeowners, it's a lot of information. What do you do at that point? Because I know it's going to be broken down, like you said, in the envelope. You talked about what's most important. You know, you focus on the envelope first, and then you start getting into your mechanical systems and your ventilation systems like ERVs, HRVs, and so forth. It's really easy to say what to do first, but it's often harder to do that as a homeowner because maybe they don't have the funds to do the envelope first, because that's usually the most expensive thing. And they're like, well, the furnace is the cheapest thing, so I'm just going to go with that. Like, how do you direct clients at that point if they're saying, I'm going to go with the furnace because, you know, that's only going to cost me $8-9 grand or whatever it's going to be, whereas the envelope's going to cost me 100.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this comes back to what the homeowner actually has intentions to do already. And then the report will be somewhat prioritized based on those comments. So for example, if the homeowner was already going to be redoing siding or windows or redoing their roof in the near future, well, then that plays into the priority level. But with each upgrade that we recommend in the report, we also have an energy advisor's comment at the end of each section, which goes into a little bit more detail. And it's more like, you should consider this because of this, or what have you. And it's more tailored to that particular project. So obviously if a project is taking off siding, for example, then that's a perfect opportunity to be thinking about air sealing at the sheathing layer and adding more insulation, which they may not have been thinking of before. Now, if they weren't planning on doing anything, then it becomes a challenge. Now, if one were to be in a situation where they have to replace the furnace, well, then that's a different situation altogether. But it certainly wouldn't be the first thing that I would do if their furnace is in good condition. And the reason for that is because, and I highlight this in my reports, but the house as it is right now has a certain heating and cooling load. And if you were to implement all the energy upgrades, the thermal enclosure upgrades that I recommend in the report, well, then now all of a sudden a house could go from like a 60,000 BTU furnace to a 20,000 BTU furnace. And so if you replace your furnace now with a 60,000 BTU furnace, and then you do all the thermal enclosure upgrades, now all of a sudden your furnace is oversized, and that can lead to comfort issues down the road.
So how does that, this is something I've talked about a lot too in the past, is that short cycling thing. So why does a furnace that is too large create comfort issues in a home?
A furnace that's too large creates comfort issues because let's say the thermostat says, okay, I need heat. It's at 21 degrees, I have to keep this house at 21 degrees. As the temperature drops outside and the temperature drops inside, it says, okay, give me some heat. If that furnace is oversized, then it's going to blast the house with a lot of heat, and then it'll satisfy that thermostat very quickly, and then it'll shut off. And so depending on how leaky a house is, how much heat loss there is, then all of a sudden the temperature inside the house drops, and then until the thermostat says, okay, it's time for me to call for the heat, and then it blasts again. So this sort of constant up and down of temperature creates a little bit of discomfort. Not only that, but let's say the thermostat is located on the main floor, and so the heat gets to that really quickly, but then it doesn't have enough time to get to that room above the garage in the bedroom furthest away from the furnace that's facing north or something like that. So that room is much cooler than the rest of the house. And so this short cycling doesn't allow for an even temperature spread. What you want, a correctly sized heating system at design temperature, which in Ottawa is about -23, -26 degrees Celsius. That heating system should be running 100% of the time to provide the heat. Now that you might think that the rest of the time it's not at 100%, but at least it's not too far off. So that's it in a nutshell as far as that comfort issue.
Yeah, so it's not able to condition the furthest rooms a lot of the time if it's too large. So you don't want it to heat up. You don't want your homes to heat up really quickly. You just want your homes to maintain a nice constant temperature, because that's what a comfortable home is, right? A home that is consistent throughout the entire home. Is that possible if you have 4 stories and one system? There's going to be some challenges there, whether or not your house is airtight. But those are things that we can resolve through proper planning, proper design. So let's get into what could potentially be coming down the pipe for grants and even a loan program here in Ottawa. I think there's already programs in other provinces, other states, but what are we seeing coming down right now?
From the federal point of view, there's a couple of programs that are coming. The Greener Home Program, it's a grant of up to $5,000 for energy efficient upgrades. The details of all of these programs are a little slim, but they're all due to be released this summer sometime. And then also another federal program run through CMHC is a $40,000 interest-free loan for energy upgrades. The exact details are very, very, very slim. So that's about all I know as far as that goes. In the Ottawa area, I know that they will also this summer be launching their Better Homes program, which is I forget what the acronym is, but it's PACE, where it's property assessed something or other. And essentially it's a loan based on the value of your house. I think it's up to 10% of the value of the house, capped to a certain overall amount to go towards energy upgrades. Now, this is
property assessed clean energy.
Wow. Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
so the homeowner isn't burdened with the actual capital costs because it ends up going onto the property tax. So depending on the structure, and I haven't seen what the Ottawa one is. I've seen how Toronto has that program. I think other areas like Edmonton and Halifax have similar programs already. And there are different packages that you can sort of apply for as far as how quickly you repay that loan through your property taxes and what interest rate.
And this has been going on for a little bit in the US, I believe, right? This is where we're learning it from. And I think on commercial properties, is that correct?
I have heard of PACE programs for many, many years. And yeah, it probably started in the US. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So that's really exciting with everything that's going on, right? Because this is obviously needed. So in your opinion, like what do you feel needs to happen in our industry, whether it's new construction or renovations? Like what do you feel needs to happen and why does it need to happen?
Well, I think these programs are great for the existing housing market because the goal for, I believe the federal, like Canadian government, but certainly the Ottawa, the city of Ottawa, the goal is by 2050, all buildings will be carbon neutral from an operational point of view, meaning that they're basically going to be net zero or net zero ready. So I think that's these kinds of programs like the Greener Home Program, the CMHC loan, the Better Homes Program, or any sort of PACE program is a fantastic way of moving the needle for existing housing. Because it's not a inexpensive process to go through, and so that's why with all of these programs, they do require a home evaluation before and a home evaluation afterwards to be eligible for the grant money and the incentives. So that's fantastic because even if a homeowner can't do every step of the way, at least the upgrade report will give them a roadmap so that after this, in the future, they can continue on and strive for that goal by 2050. So I think we're heading in the right direction for existing housing. For new housing, that really depends on your area. I know the federal program's coming out with a STEP program that's coming from BC. The City of Ottawa is looking at STEP programs to help builders, developers, renovators get to that goal by 2030. Actually, it's a bit more aggressive because with new housing, it should be a little bit easier to get there. Now, in Ontario, we already have a pretty good building code, but it can always get better. And we are working with a lot of our builders and clients to get them to net zero now.
I think we have somebody else who needs to say something.
I can say that again if you want, once she calms down. She thinks she's just barking at nothing.
All good.
No guarantee. Okay.
This is all part of the fun, right? We're all working from home these days, so try to find the quietest place.
That's it.
With the fastest internet.
Yeah.
All right, so ton of information, a lot of good things happening. I definitely recommend anybody who's thinking of renovating or building, like, you have to have an energy advisor. We don't do a project where Stephen's not involved or Homesol's not involved, at least where we are, because it doesn't make sense for us to start ripping a wall apart and not put it back together better than we found it. It doesn't make sense to not have that baseline to work from to see if we've improved it, right? So I always recommend it. It's such a small, to bring on someone like Stephen, no matter where you live, it's such a small price for a huge benefit, in my opinion, because it gives you the data that you need in order to set the targets. And without a target, you're just doing your renovation, you're, blindfolded, dizzy, and trying to pin the tail on the donkey, and you have no idea where the heck the donkey is, right? So
yeah, and you can't manage what you don't measure, right? So that's a great point. Setting a baseline and setting yourself a target of where you want to get to. We don't just stop at the reports. We also provide ongoing building science consulting. We'll work with homeowners and builders, renovators, to make sure that what they're doing is getting them heading in the right direction. And let's say a house says, okay, we're redoing the whole house. We're going an exterior change or retrofit approach. Once they get the air barrier, their new air barrier system completed, we'll come in and do an air tightness test and make sure that they're heading in the right direction, that there are no significant air leaks before they cover it up and continue on in the process. So that's part of the sort of services that we provide from Homesol.
Thanks, Stephen. And those are services we continue to use as well. So let's talk about, before we leave, before I let you go, what's happening on May 27th? You have a webinar coming up with SmartNet Alliance in the City of Ottawa.
Yeah, so I'm one of 3 presenters. I think it's going to be structured such that it's going to cover a home evaluation, and 2 other presenters will speak about the process of the evaluation, and then I'll be kind of focusing on what happens after, and obviously with the goal of net zero. So that's going to be really fun. I'm looking forward to that.
So we'll be sure to post the link below. So if anybody's interested in registering for that and learning from a couple other energy advisors as well, and getting more details about the process and how it works, definitely recommend you do it. SmartNet Alliance is a great resource as well for anything to do with energy efficient building or sustainability in general, not just residential building. They cover a lot of different things. So definitely recommend you check that out. We'll share all the links below. Stephen, any parting words of advice before you go?
I have one thing that will help many existing home evaluations. You can reach out to your municipality and get access to your building plans. For in the City of Ottawa, it'll cost you $73. They'll look at your house location. And if the plans are on file, then they can scan it and send you a digital copy. That, if you've got lots of time, that's something that you can do now. That'll not only help the energy evaluator, because you can send them the plans to work on before they get on to your house, but it can also help with getting quotes and estimates down the road. And if you're planning on doing a major remodel, then you've already got the existing plans. So that's something that everyone can do now from any municipality, because they should have your plans now. Depends on how old your house is, obviously, but it's worth a look.
That's a great piece of advice. And with material costs right now, people are wondering, should I start? Should I not? What I recommend is that you start planning at the very least, because if you're planning on doing something next year, when materials start to come back down, if you don't have your contractor or things lined up and ready to go, you're not going to be doing any work next year, because what's happening is that things are just getting pushed down the line. So we're just going to end up being even that much more busy next year when prices for materials drop. It's just going to be that much harder to find trades and contractors to get your project done. So start planning now, get your plans. It's a great piece of advice. And if somebody wants to get a hold of you, Stephen, what's the best way?
Through Homesol. The Homesol website is a good way. That's probably the best. Yeah,
that's homesolbuildingsolutions.com, correct?
That's right. And we're in the process of rebuilding our website. So stay tuned on that in the next coming months.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Stephen. Always a pleasure speaking with you.
Always a pleasure speaking to you, Casey.
Glad you watched this video until the very end. If you haven't already, hit subscribe, hit the bell button to get all the notifications and all the great videos that we have coming out every single week. And remember to live consciously.